Interview on Channel 12, and we're going to interview Gloria and Mel Nimmer. They're from LA.
Good evening, everyone in the television world.
We're so happy to be here with you.
And my sister Beth and I are going to be interviewing them, and Beth is going to ask them the first question. What's your childhood like?
My childhood?
Please, I'm on camera too.
But this question was directed to me, right? Well, I grew up in New York City. And my childhood was rather nice, but sort of poor. And I miss certain things, like having a beautiful home, such as you have here, and such as you have in not in Los Angeles, Champaign. On the whole, it was pretty good.
And you?
Now, is your question to me, what was Mama's childhood like?
No, what was your childhood
like? I had a rather lucky, fortunate childhood. Although, of course, Mama and I each grew up at the time of the Depression, and my father was affected to some extent by the Depression, not as badly as most people, and so, by and large, my childhood was a protected one, and a good one. If anything, the negative side was overprotected, not underprotected. But that's a long story out of Freud.
Our second question is, what were all the jobs you had at different times, and just tell us all about them.
Well, my first big job was at Awful Fresh McFarland.
I remember.
That was a candy store. And it was my first job, and I was going to UCLA. I was a university student. I'd never worked. And I worked there for 2 weeks during Christmas vacation, and I could eat all the chocolate I wanted. First 3 days, I ate a lot of chocolate. Then, I couldn't stand the smell of chocolate. So for years, I didn't eat chocolate, but now I love it again.
But tell about you and the cash register at Awful Fresh McFarland.
One day, nobody was in the store. So I was fooling around with the cash register, and I rang up $999.99, just to practice. Just to practice. And then I didn't know how to clear the machine. You know, you're supposed to clear it, otherwise you have to ring it up. I didn't know how to clear it, so I rang up $999.99. When the manager came in and saw the strip there, he said, "What a big sale you made, $999.99. And I had to say, "Oh no, I didn't really sell that. I just didn't know how to clear the machine." So he fired me.
And that was the end of the job.
That was the end of my other job. I worked for Hagapos Kulmagin, an Armenian. He sold real estate. He was a pretty fresh man, and that was a short-lived job.
Mama was a pretty cute young secretary.
That was about all the jobs.
Old boss.
What about your job now?
My job now? Well, why don't you find out what jobs?
My early jobs? Right, my early jobs. Well, I never had a job until I got married. And at the end of the first semester of law school, first year of law school, Mom and I had been to Harvard together, my first year of law school, and we came back to California for summer. And I naturally assumed during the summer I would do nothing, as had been my experience for the last 26 years, except for 3 years in the Army when I did some things. So I was going to sit home, and Becca was there too.
No, Becca was about to be born.
Oh, Becca was about to be born, that's right. At any rate, well, she was there, but she wasn't exactly present. And Mama said to me, "Well, surely you're not going to just sit around and not work all summer." And I said, "Surely I am." Well, we had a discussion about this. And now it's very common for law students in the summer to work for law firms. But at that time, it was not. But after a discussion, we agreed, more or less, that it might be a good idea if I did it. Well, thinking about who I would like to work for, there was a man named Bob Kennedy. Bob Kenny, not Kennedy. Robert W. Kenney, who had been Attorney General in the state of California, and somebody I admired very greatly, a liberal, sort of left-wing lawyer, who then ran for governor, but he ran against a man who was the all-time champion vote-getter in California named Earl Warren, and so he lost. In fact, he even lost in the primary. But then he went into private practice, and he was somebody I was interested in working for. So I went to see him, not knowing him at all, and he was very gracious, and in fact, got to know me personally. I told him that my wife was pregnant, among other things, and as a footnote on that, when Becca was born, we received flowers in the hospital from Mom. But Mr. Kenney told me that he didn't have any need for a summer law clerk, but that he had just dissolved a partnership, and his former partner, Morris Cohen, with whom he was on very good terms, might be able to use a law student to help him. So I went to see Mr. Cohen in Hollywood. Mr. Cohen, it turned out, was then lawyer for the Screenwriters Guild, and he did employ me to work for the summer. And that's how I first started interest in copyright law, because Mr. Cohen worked in copyright, working with the writers. And I became very interested in copyright law, and since then I've done some further work in copyright. But the way I got started in copyright was because Mama insisted that I not stay home all summer that first year. And that was my first job.
And you are now teaching people.
I'm teaching people.
Your daughter born yet?
Oh yes, she got born.
She sure did.
And we named her Rebecca Lee.
And tell us about your job now.
Right now, well, for the last 15 years, I guess, I've been working with people, children and adults who have learning disabilities. And they're not quite as smart as you girls. They have a lot of trouble in school. So we help them to learn how to read and write and spell, get along better in life.
And then Papa said that he is teaching copyright right now.
That's true. I do teach copyright.
And we would like to see your beautiful daughter.
Oh, would you like to meet the daughter that was born
Rebecca
to us?
Lee.
Our firstborn child. Here she is. Whom we love so very dearly.
And this is Mother's Day.
I've gotten a little bigger since that day, huh?
She's our perfect little mother.
She sure is.
How did my parents, Rebecca Lee, get married? I'd like to know that.
Well, all right. Shall we tell about that, Mama?
Okay.
Well, do you remember one evening we were out?
We are the children of Rebecca Lee.
Of course you are. And Mr. Paul Marcus, I believe.
Yes. And we'd like to hear that story.
Well, Becca and
About what?
Paul were about how they got married? All right. Well, I won't go into the part about how I first let Paul into the house and when they first met. That's
No, you weren't there.
I think I was, Rebecca.
No.
We've had a running argument on that. But let me get to the crucial moment.
Okay.
Mama and I were out for the evening, and Becca had a cold, and she was in bed, and Paul, who was visiting her very often, they were dating, was at the house when we went out. When we came home about 11:30 in the evening, Paul was gone already, and Becca was sitting on the staircase. Why did you do that? So, Becca seemed to be kind of nervous, do you remember? And we didn't know why. And Paul was gone, and Becca said to us, Paul and I have been having a very serious discussion. I should add that Becca at that time was, I believe, 19 years old.
19.
And so how old was Paul?
He was 20.
They were
20
very
or
old,
21?
19 and 20.
Actually, yeah, I think I had just turned 19 and Paul was 20.
Yeah. All right, so there was this 19-year-old young woman sitting on the
Young girl.
stairs and said to her mother and father, You know, Paul and I have been having a very serious discussion this evening. I didn't know what possibly that portended. So I said, yes, and so what about it? She said, well, Paul and I have been talking about getting married. And she looked as if she was expecting me to say, how dare you, this is absurd, ridiculous, you're such a baby. But she was young. But Mom and I knew Paul, and we felt...
We liked him.
We loved him. We felt Paul was exactly right for Becca. And so we said, well, how wonderful.
Oh,
That's
you
great.
said you're going to let us get married?
You really are going to let us? Well, no, she didn't quite say that. That's the implication. But Paul didn't have the nerve to stick around. But he came around the next day. At any rate.
But now we'd like to introduce you to Paul.
Yes, I think the time has come to meet this young man.
Oh.
All right, ready?
Yes.
And now to reenact that first meeting afterwards. You're Paul Marcus, I believe. Welcome to the family. I'm so glad.
Happy to have you.
It's been a wonderful time ever since.
You wear very well.
And they lived happily ever after. It's so
have
great.
these two
And
wonderful
look at these two
daughters.
wonderful kids that
So
came
gorgeous.
in.
We're so gorgeous. So gorgeous.